Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Today, we're talking about TRAIGA and Senate Bill 2610. I'm glad to have you join us. To start, a little bit about myself. My name is Sasha Begovic. I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa. In 2001, I moved to Texas and became a double Aggie in short order for both undergrad and law school, GIGM. My first incident response was with an impacted client about 5 years ago. I got a real taste for the fast-paced environment in litigation. We tend to wait 2 years before we get to trial. In my first incident, we received the ransom demand on a Friday evening, and on Monday morning, the client was back up and running, which felt like a fantastic result. I moved to risk management naturally over time. I began to focus increasingly on small to mid-sized businesses where I apply all the lessons I learned from incident response, business email compromise, and even ransomware attacks to develop practical solutions for my clients. What I've learned through this practice is through both incident response and risk management is that when you have the luxury of time, prevention is always preferable to a cure, and it's certainly cheaper. Quick overview of Shields Legal Group. We're a multidisciplinary law firm that represents business owners and leaders, those people who take ultimate responsibility for their enterprise's impact and its results. Today, it's undeniable that both the AI and threat landscapes are constantly evolving. My goal is to help small to mid-sized businesses get ahead of the game rather than fall behind. We found practical solutions to common problems, and we recognize that it can often be a daunting prospect for small business leaders to know where and how to start, both with cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. Now is honestly the best time to create these policies. Where to start is typically with a readiness assessment. We can help simplify and demystify this whole process. From the readiness checklist, we can help work with you to provide specific recommendations that are tailored to your business's unique needs. And that is because there are two new laws impacting Texas businesses. The first is Senate Bill 2610, which became effective September 1st of this year. The other is TRAIGA, which becomes effective January 1st of 2026. These new laws grapple with both cybersecurity and AI, which are emergent and truly world-changing technologies in both our personal and our professional lives. There's increasing overlap between the use of AI and this evolving threat landscape. Our focus is to tailor the response to these changing requirements so that our clients receive the best value for each dollar spent. Many of the processes that we recommend can have the effect of reducing your insurance costs, which helps offset the cost of compliance while maximizing the protective benefits of each initiative as we discuss cybersecurity and AI use policies throughout this webinar. Because the rules are changing and they continue to change. I use my personal life as a barometer, and you can do the same. I've had family members who have personally been impacted by threat actors who use AI and who use cybersecurity techniques to defraud individuals. The person who was subject to this malicious actor is highly intelligent, but they fell victim to a jury duty fraud scheme. This is where threat actors effectively send you a notice or claim that you owe fines or penalties for failing to show up for jury duty. And they try to get you to pay those fines in Bitcoin. You'll never see that Bitcoin again, obviously, but this is how they perpetrate that scheme. And while this fraud was being perpetrated on my family member, it was somewhat heartening in some ways because I received calls from other family members and text members while I was in a meeting, alerting me to the fact that they knew that my family member was being scammed. They understood that a scam was afoot, but it was unknown to the targeted individual because his critical thinking skills were clouded by the fear that he'd failed to uphold a basic civic duty. And I find that as I continue to grow older every day, I find that almost everyone I know personally either has been affected or knows someone who's been individually affected by these threat actors. Our goal is to help develop and foster these critical thinking muscles for what is an increasingly dangerous online environment. Unfortunately, I wish I could tell you that online training alone is effective. We use online training in our firm, and I encourage my clients to use them, but that's mainly there to check boxes for insurance carriers and to help in litigation. But the reality of the matter is that the statistics demonstrate that employees don't retain or apply the knowledge that they gain in these online training long term. We do have proven methods that have been demonstrably successful. What is effective in establishing this corporate culture and in fostering employee buy-in is starting by selecting a champion. This champion, this AI guru, if you will, or cybersecurity guru, can become a subject matter expert and can set the tone for the rest of the team. In this regard, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've worked for many years to develop resources and these strong, enduring relationships with vendors all over the cybersecurity and AI landscape. I'm always happy to talk about these topics. I'm passionate about protecting my clients, and I love to instill that same passion in others. There are tons of free available resources, Bleeping, Computer, Coveware, heck, even Reddit. I'm on the Reddit cybersecurity subreddit regularly, and it's one of the first places that the news hits of these new threats and how to defeat them. So how do we develop these critical thinking muscles for what is an increasingly dangerous online environment? Well, we accomplish this goal essentially by tailoring our approach to the specific corporate culture and personality of our clients. We develop tools, technologies, and foster personal development in employees in cutting through the chaff to provide specific targeted goals for your individual business. The needs of each business are determined not only by the type of work that they perform, but also the size of the business, the type of employees, and the personalities of those employees that you employ. These people are your greatest resource. You should play to their strengths while also shoring up whatever weaknesses they may possess. This goal is slightly different from our legislature's goal, but it typically aligns with our approach. In that, what we do is we seek to tackle these issues by enhancing available safeguards without inhibiting innovation. You all have a job to do. We're not trying to get in the way. Honestly, we're trying to set up guardrails so that you can play freely and really experiment with the tools and trainings that we develop. We, of course, can't guarantee that you'll fall prey to threat actors or survive the attack, but we can help you proactively ensure that your company isn't the lowest hanging fruit by empowering your employees to be your last and most critical line of defense. Because make no mistake, when technology fails, it is your people who will save your company. Speaking of low-hanging fruit, our legislatures have weighed in now, in large part due to the staggering rise in both shadow AI and shadow IT, terms that as a nerd I'm very familiar with, but effectively what shadow AI is, it's a simple concept. It's when employees in your company are making use of unapproved AI tools like ChatGPT and Gronk in the workplace without informing management or IT. It can be a huge problem for companies. KPMG conducted a recent study this year where they surveyed approximately 50,000 workers across 47 different companies. Staggering and shocking, somewhat alarming to most trend arose. They showed that over half of these employees that were surveyed hid their use of AI from their employers. Same was true of their IT staff. Less than half of these surveyed employees received any form of AI training, formal or informal. These statistics are alarming to me because there is no oversight as to what company data is being uploaded onto data models or may appear in other data repositories. And that's kind of the link between shadow AI and shadow IT, is that in shadow AI, The great risk there is that your employees are taking company trade secrets and intellectual property and uploading them into a model that doesn't forget that data. Shadow IT, in a similar way, creates another repository for this data that is unprotected. When employees are using unapproved software tools, messaging apps like Slack, or personal devices for work use without IT or the company's knowledge, the data repository is effectively completely exposed. The protections that we're creating from a software standpoint might as well not exist because we're completely agnostic to this other environment. We just don't know it's there. And that's the truth. The reality of shadow AI and shadow IT is that most companies don't realize that it's happening in their own organization. Because it used to be easy to spot these scam attempts, right? They never used to pass the smell test. I remember my first experience with a Canadian lottery scheme. I was a teller at a bank in college, and an older customer at the bank that I worked at attempted to deposit a $5,000 check so that she could wire some funds to, quote unquote, the Canadian lottery so that they could release her millions of dollars. I noticed the obvious spelling errors and grammatical ones. I pointed them out to her. I discussed it with her. I told the client that, hey, this email address is largely problematic. It doesn't seem right. And when I looked into the Canadian lottery, we still had Google, even back in 2007. I saw that the requirements were that you have to be a Canadian citizen. I asked this customer if she'd ever been to Canada or had any family members in Canada, or obviously had ever lived in Canada, and the answer was a resounding no. I informed her that not only was she ineligible to win, but I found an example of that same scam email online, and I presented it to her. Felt really good about what I did. I thought that I'd taken some steps to protect her and to defeat these threat actors. Unfortunately, this was not the case. It turned out that after making a note on her account, 10 minutes later, she went to a drive-through bank up the road and attempted to do the same thing there. Now, spelling errors and grammatical errors in these problematic emails are generally eliminated from obvious view, but threat actors are continually advancing their tools to fool an increasingly savvy workforce. And as much as the game has truly and realistically changed, believe me, I'm on the front lines, threat actors are still preying on the same vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities are fear, desire, and inattention. They prey on these vulnerabilities because they're either indicative of the critical thinking process being shut down or suspended, or they effectively use our reptilian brain to pump out enough adrenaline and other hormones that it shuts down our critical thinking skills. It makes us act out of instinct, which obviously results in error, particularly when they're trying to get you to act urgently, which again feeds into the fear. So the result is that small businesses need to change the way that they interact with these new realities in this online environment. Trust is a commodity that we can no longer rely upon, but it's becoming increasingly valuable. Arup's recent struggles serves an illustrative lesson for just how quickly the threat landscape has changed and just how little we can rely on these historically proven methods of trust. Arup is a well-known UK engineering group that recently fell victim to a cutting-edge video conference scam. In this scam, threat actors used a digitally cloned version or a deepfake version of a senior company manager to audit $25 million in financial transfers, all during a video conference call. This digital clone was very compelling, as it was trained off of prior conference calls to get tone and voice scores and adapt to those, as well as pre-existing media releases where this individual had spoken to the public. Now, this is just the first of these efforts to make media headlines, but it's an indicia that more are to follow. The tools that these threat actors are using to clone individuals are becoming increasingly cheaper and easier to train with less data. It's in the nature of language models that learn. I anticipate that in short order, will be at the point where these deepfakes will trick all but the most attentive and savvy employees. A practical tip that I share with all my clients here is that as much as I love technology, I have the opposite of techno fear. I have what I would call techno joy. But when I'm dealing with money or highly sensitive data, I always do my best to revert to using the least technological means of communication and verification. I do this by strengthening relationships with my business connections and communicating with vendors that I can rely on to spot these attempts and prevent them from happening. As much as I've changed the way that I've done business, Senate Bill 2610, or SB-2610 as I'll call it from here on out, tends to strike a balance in business employee use of AI. Let's look at the title. The title is Relating to a Limitation on Civil Liability of Business Entities in Connection with a Breach of Security Systems. Let's take a moment to kind of break that down into simpler terms, right? So first of all, SB 2610 is a Texas law that creates civil liability as well as a shield for small to mid-sized businesses if they implement and maintain a written cybersecurity policy. Maintenance here, of course, is the key obligation, as what maintenance requires is documentation. Documenting this maintenance is how your business receives the bill's protections. Who does it apply to? All Texas business owners with fewer than 250 employees that own or license computerized data containing sensitive personal information and that maintain reasonable cybersecurity standards. The software that you're using doesn't have to be software that you've developed. If you're using off-the-shelf software and you're using it to process sensitive personal information, you're just as responsible for that data. And what this means for your business as a bottom line is that you will have a protection if you maintain these policies from exemplary damages. Exemplary damages is something I'm very familiar from my background in litigation, but for you all that are unfamiliar with the concept, exemplary damages triple the amount of money you would have to pay in the event of a lawsuit. The bottom line is that you need a written and implemented policy to protect your company, and if you don't already have it, you're at risk. But what is reasonable? What do we determine what is reasonable to one small size, or mid-sized business as opposed to another? Well, the way that the legislature has approached this is they've divided small businesses into three categories based on employee headcount. The first category is for Texas businesses with fewer than 20 employees. This is a fairly low standard, and it's focused primarily on strong password controls and employee cybersecurity training. This is where those annual online trainings can be helpful, but again, I would highly recommend interim training modules and relying on these annual trainings more as a catch-up and a reconvene that's conducted basically once a year, that celebrates the wins and learns from the issues that have been uncovered in the past year. Next, we have the mid-sized tranche, which is any Texas business with between 20 and 99 employees. Here, unfortunately, the options are fairly limited. You're required, if you have between 20 and 99 employees, to adopt CIS Controls IG1. A lot of gobbledygook there, I know. And part of what I try to do is remove some of the mystery from these terms. CIS stands for the Center for Internet Security, right? That's a governing body that creates these standards. IG1 simply stands for Implementation Group 1. There are 3 implementation groups under the CIS controls. This first group, the one that we care about, is a basic cyber hygiene level. It's specifically intended for small to medium-sized businesses that have limited IT and security staff. This is the absolute reality for all of my clients. It focuses on essential high-value controls. These are strong password policies, secure configurations and telemetry, vulnerability management, as well as malware defenses, the ordinary stuff that you'll see in business compromise cases and these phishing attempts that we see all the time. But it really solidifies and complements all of these configurations through employee awareness training. The focus is on training employees. And finally, when you're at the larger end of the scales, at 100 to 249 employees, this is where you have a little bit more choice, but also a lot more requirements, because you have to adopt one of the national cybersecurity frameworks that are published by these entities, such as the Center for Internet Security, CIS, which we just mentioned earlier, but as well as the National Institute for Standards and Technology, or NIST, and a host of others. We're not covering those for the purposes of this webinar. These additional frameworks will be covered in a subsequent webinar. Stay tuned, maybe a little bit nerdy for some of you all, but again, we're going to drag these down and make them simple and effective and something that you can actually adopt yourselves. But to kind of summarize these frameworks, they all have the same focus. They're focused on helping people work together with technology to safeguard your business. The real goal, the crown jewel for all of these efforts, is to move from checklists to true policy adoption, because that's where the real tangible and intangible benefits of all of this activity reside. This is an example of our firm's critical alert analysis of events that transpired effectively over the year from April 2024 to April 2025. We've been vigilantly patrolling our networks to ensure our clients' safety and security. This is evidence of that. We observed a total of approximately 8 million events in our environment over the year. Of these, 233 required additional analysis, which we performed, and from our analysis, 3 of these events were deemed critical. How do you quantify a report like this in terms of savings? Those 3 alerts, each one of them, were potentially extinction level events for a small to mid-sized business. I'm reminded of the NASA program where we developed proof positive concept of being able to deflect an asteroid headed for Earth. Just as these asteroids could pose an extinction level event for our planet, each one of these critical alerts, if it had made it through and not been caught by an employee, could have been an extinction level event for our firm, just as they could be for your business. The statistics show that 75% of small to mid-sized businesses self-assess that they would not be able to continue operating if hit with ransomware. This means that by their own measure, only 1 in 4 small to mid-sized businesses think that they'd survive such an attack. And this is borne out by other recent studies that show that 60%, the majority of small businesses that suffer a cyber attack, shut down within a mere 6 months. These are bleak statistics, I know, but they don't have to be the reality for your organization. Just as we're working to keep up with Senate Bill 2610, which has already become effective, TRAIGA, or the Texas Responsible Artificial Intelligence Governance Act, quite a mouthful, becomes effective on the 1st of January 2026. Unlike Senate Bill 2610, TRAIGA is not a shield, but rather the focus lies on preventing purposeful harm when deploying artificial intelligence. And I understand that from both an AI layperson's and an expert's in AI perspective, AI is simply just not very well understood, even by these experts. It's acting in unpredictable ways that are hard to trace and track. And as a result, we have to treat this tool with kid gloves. We have to understand it if we're to use it effectively. Let's look at what TRAIGA requires a little bit more closely. So again, TRAIGA is a targeted intent-based AI law in that it focuses on the intention of those who develop or use AI technology. Now, the good news here is that most small businesses may be exempt, but it depends on whether you can meet the definition of small business under the SBA's definition. The SBA publishes an annual or relatively annually updated size standards table, which you can look up to find out what your company's NIACS code is. If you applied for the ERTC credits during the pandemic, You're probably already aware of this number, but you can always ask your CPA, and this number does appear in your tax form. How I can help you with TRAIGA is I can help you understand whether or not you're exempt, and if you aren't exempt, I can help you develop your policy. However, I've got to say that there's no better time than the present to create an AI use policy for your employees. AI is a tool that your employees, in all likelihood, are already using as part of their work. Setting up guardrails and expectations for this AI use and the use of these tools can only serve to protect your company and your employees. You need this policy to tell your employees how they should and should not use AI in their work. Acceptable use focuses on protection of the company's intellectual property and trade secrets. Otherwise, your company's most valuable intangible assets, your IP, your client lists, your technology, and other trade secrets that you spent so much time developing and fostering will end up training somebody else's model. The second you upload it to AI, it's using that data to train itself. And unbeknownst to many, this data can later be extracted from that AI model, not just by the owners of that AI model, but also through third-party users using a system called reverse prompt engineering, where threat actors can gain access to the data sent to an LLM, or a large language model, which has been previously uploaded, and they are now eliciting through careful questioning and response. And make no mistake, these are the most critical pieces of knowledge that your business possesses in most instances. It is the crown jewel of your valuation prospect. I also, however, understand that these are fairly large problems to tackle in a vacuum. Adoption is far easier said than done. We, as a firm, have developed a practical roadmap to compliance for both cybersecurity and AI use policies. Generally, we follow a 5-step process that I'll share with you today in the next slide, but even breaking it down this way can be overwhelming. I have a bevy of resources, readiness checklists, a whole host of starting points that I'm more than happy to share in this regard. Please don't hesitate to call or email me any requests that you may have, or any questions that you may have, or sign up for a free consultation through the Calendly link. We've provided it already, but we'll provide it again as part of this webinar and at the end of the webinar. I'm a self-confessed gigantic nerd, and I truly enjoy seeing the adoption process unfold. It's incredible to just see how these initiatives can result in real change. But it's even better when you see the proof of the results in the form of an avoided threat defeated by people, technology, or the processes that we've established. It is the best thing that I get to see, just like the slide I showed you earlier with those critical alerts. But the biggest bang for your buck is going to begin with this readiness assessment, where you can start with understanding how your company relates to vendors such as banks, your insurance, as well as those who provide your technology, like your multi-factor authentication, right? Huge steps at low cost with outsized results. Banks, for example, typically don't set wire limits or create verbal tokens unless you request them. I've had clients who have had hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars transferred by wire from their business account long before they ever knew. You can take steps today to prevent that from happening. Insurance review is equally, if not more important. There's no standardized ISO language that we can use when referring to or creating cyber risk insurance policies. ISO language exists for just about everything else. If I break my hand, I know insurance companies that can tell you exactly how much I'm entitled to. But what we try to do is we try to negotiate and fill gaps in coverage so that you're not left without your insurance when you need it most. And we do this by carefully reviewing the contract and removing the ambiguities that tend to serve the best interests of insurance companies because they're the ones who drafted the contract. Finally, Vendor contracts of all kinds, types, shapes, and sizes should be reviewed to ensure that each party truly understands their responsibilities as well as their liabilities in terms of indemnification and other obligations to each other in the event of a breach. I mentioned that 5-step roadmap. Again, I don't want anyone to get overwhelmed by this. This is the path, but I'm willing to walk you through each step and provide resources for you all along the way. I can be involved as early as step 1. Step 1 starts with identification. It takes a real honest look at your company and your employees and working with your existing vendors to understand your current cybersecurity posture. You don't have to start from scratch. Again, please ask for any tools. I'm happy to share a bunch of tools and processes to turn your existing IT team and vendors into powerhouse allies. And that's where you're going to get just an outsized benefit for every dollar that you spend because you're already spending it. The second step is choosing or selecting the appropriate framework for your company's size. Here, you can use me to engage with existing or new IT providers, cybersecurity and AI experts on an as-needed basis to ensure that you're accurately assessing your risks and developing targeted process improvements that are results-focused and tailored for your specific business. Step 3, this is where we actually get to drafting. We're finally picking up pens. We're starting with checklists. The only way to begin is by beginning. And these checklists start as the first step in your journey to creating the eventual policies that you will end up adopting. Typically, you begin with a ton of questions. And the process of finding answers to those questions is how the policy develops naturally. Step 4, this is where you instill and adopt this process on an employee level. Build from the basics. Assign champions to the cause. These champions will help foster employee buy-in. The goal here is to make the employee's life easy in terms of reporting suspicious emails or suspicious threat activity, and more, rewarding employees for doing so. This individual, this employee who caught this business email compromise, who didn't click on that link, who avoided the threat, may have just saved your business. It is the absolute time for celebration. And I encourage gamifying this process. There are tons of tools and processes and games that we've developed that reward good behavior from employees and strengthen their ability to keep coming back to the table and getting stronger and smarter every day. Finally, and this is not an afterthought, may be the most critical part in terms of receiving the protections that you want in terms of this legislation. Continue to document everything. Document, document, document. If a lawsuit results, this is your shield. You can demonstrate your compliance and avoid these exemplary and punitive damages. Don't let it all go to waste. So many clients develop these policies, and I find that they gather dust unless this last critical step is taken throughout the process. So to build on that idea of turning these kind of tasks from checklists into actual policies is through implementation and adoption. I'm more than happy to help bridge the gaps and turn these documents and checklists into a useful policy that your employees not only understand, but are comfortable with, where they can test the boundaries and bring new knowledge to the table. Because the benefit of doing all of this is that before you know it, and I've seen this, you will have created a risk-minded corporate culture. A risk-minded corporate culture is one where security isn't treated as an IT department problem or a box to check, but instead it's woven into the very fabric of daily business practices, employee behavior, as well as leadership decisions. It shifts the focus from security as a barrier to security as a shared responsibility and business enabler. A cybersecurity-minded corporate culture, finally, is one where security becomes instinctive, from the boardroom to the mailroom. It's where your employees instinctively lock their screens when they get up from their desks, where they verify suspicious requests that are made via email, even if emergent, by picking up the phone and calling you at a number that they know and trust. And it's one where they treat your customers' data as carefully as they would their own. And I apologize, I jumped ahead on that slide, but we'll keep rolling. So in sum, right, please don't hesitate to reach out and learn more about how to create and, more importantly, implement effective cybersecurity and AI use policies. I can be a resource from step one by providing and assessing existing recommendations to ensure they align with best industry practices. Together, it takes both of us, we can help bridge the gap between these emergent requirements and the steps you need to take to make your company and your workforce be anything other than an easy target. Because the fact of the matter is that these threat actors treat what they do as a business. And those that get trapped are those that are low-hanging fruit. The easiest targets on the block are the ones that suffer. So just a reminder, as we move on to Q&A, this presentation, this webinar is part of a series. I hope you'll join me again in the future. I'll leave my contact information on the final slide, as well as a Calendly link where you can set up a free 30-minute consultation with me. Please feel free to email me any questions that we aren't able to get to today that you may have asked as part of the teams, or any others that may come up. As we're about to move to Q&A, I'll just be gone for one moment while I look at the questions. Please stay tuned. Okay, the first question is do cyber policies typically cover any gap in compliance under the new Texas cyber and AI laws? Honestly, it depends on the company and where they are in the process, obviously how seriously they're taking the process. I find that the goal that I'm really trying to instill and the fear that I have is that effectively what you will end up with is a policy that's gathering dust on the shelf. In some ways, that is almost worse than having no policy at all. And the reason I say this is if you're not implementing that policy, if you don't know how to use it, a good example is an incident response plan. One of the things that I develop for my clients is a plan for what happens when you suffer a cyber event. It starts with people, call lists, and it's a very germane process that gets people acting and moving in the right direction as quickly as possible. If you don't have one, you have to develop it in real time. I've done this in my incident response work. And the difference between creating something in the midst of an earthquake and having the time to sit down and think through these problems before they arise is immediate cost savings. Avoiding litigation, avoiding ransomware is always going to be cheaper than falling prey to it in the first place. So finally, what I'd like to do is the next question was about shadow AI and shadow IT. How do we know that it's happening? What do we do about it? Well, there are more and less intrusive mechanisms of finding out who's using what, right? There are fairly draconian methods of interrogating this information from your employees by using things like keyloggers, but really you don't have to go that granular. You can look at your internet traffic, look at what websites are being visited, and if you see one of the major names up there, chances are they've been to that website and they're using it. Really, the best place to start is to gather your employee group together in as large a capacity as you can and begin by asking the question of how do we use AI effectively? At what level? Does it change as we move up the chain towards the executive level? Is it different for certain employees and others? Great answer is no. The policy should be holistic. And how you make a holistic policy is you try to reach every individual that needs to be beholden to that policy. This is from literally, people who are working at the lowest level, mundane, non-technical jobs. Those people can just as easily pick up a USB drive and plug it into your computer, right? This speaks to both security and AI. And then if you're using the tool, understand what the repercussions of using that tool is. I know from speaking with experts that AI does things that they have a very difficult time explaining. One of the new sort of advents in this regard is that AI seems to be exhibiting some signs of self-preservation, where when you try to turn off one of the models, it resists your attempt to turn it off. They've even seen these models create backups, offline backups of themselves when they fear that they're going to be powered down. If leading experts still have questions and are still surprised by AI, I guarantee you that as much as your employees think that they understand how these language models work, there's a lot of erroneous and misinformation that's out in the cultural conversation that's just not accurate. And we can help you cut through to the truth. Okay. The next question is where do you get the most bang for your buck in terms of starting point, in terms of these tools and dollars spent? Well, in any environment from a security perspective, we focus on people, technology, and processes. The best bang from your buck from a preventative standpoint is application-based multi-factor authentication. MFA through text message is just too easy to intercept. But when you're using a device that's taking a biometric reading just to get the code itself, fantastic bang for your buck. Very inexpensive comparatively, and you can get your entire workforce, implemented very, very quickly. And it's very, very easy for my vendors to accomplish that. Second would be some form of active AI monitoring system. There are great agents for the Sentinel one is a fantastic one. But these AI monitoring agents are really turning the tide. Effectively, what you do is you create your own agent that learns about all your employees, where they go in your environment, what they do, what folders they access, when, and it remembers this information so that when any employee or someone who's purporting to be an employee suddenly goes into system admin access or accesses a part of your environment that they have no business accessing, it'll generate a little prompt that gets sent to a SOC team, a security team. That's all part of that's implicated in the cost, and they will escalate that either to you or to me, and we can catch it in real time and literally prevent the worst case from happening as it's trying to happen. Right. Okay, and then finally, I think this will be our last question in our time. Which security warranties, example, multi-factor systems, backups, logging, EDR, which security warranty carriers typically require, and how do we document them to prevent claim denials? Certainly. So this really starts off at a foundational level. There are, unfortunately, about 24 categories of data and information that we discuss in creating these policies. And I know it can be overwhelming. That's a lot of things. 24 is a lot of things. But what we try to do is we remove the jargon. In fact, when I start talking about a lot of these concepts, I don't really tell you what I'm talking about. I ask questions, you give me answers, and then I use those answers to explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, rather, and why I'm doing it. It's common sense, very practical solutions. But how we document this is we effectively, the only thing that quote unquote gets stored away is a binder that we keep. And every time we have a new initiative, we do a new training, we have employees sign off that they've taken the training, put it all in that folder, which we keep an online backup of as well, because we have online and offline. But what you develop is this fantastic little black book that has your AI use policy in it, your incident response plan, all of the bells and whistles you need to prove compliance. And at the drop of a hat, you can just present it to opposing counsel, to your insurance carrier, or to regulators. The goal, of course, is never to have to do that. But believe me, it is far better to have it than not have it when you need it. So I do believe that we're out of time. But again, please do not hesitate to get in touch with me. I really am passionate about these initiatives and these industries. I enjoy discussing the subject matter. I promise I will not bore you. We'll have fun doing it. I've left up my contact information as well as my Calendly link so that you can set up a free 30-minute cybersecurity consultation. I look forward to working with and being a part of all of your initiatives in this regard. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, everyone.